Good evening. I'm Mark Rozelle, and I serve as the Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government here at George Mason University, and we are very proud to host the Michael V. Hayden Center here. It's great to see all of you, and we have over 1,100 persons who have signed up for both the in-person and also the virtual participation in this forum. And at last count, attendees are from 43 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and 20 countries. A warm welcome, therefore, to those of you online from Australia, Brazil, Ecuador, Barbados, Canada, Costa Rica, Mexico, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Romania, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Jordan, the UAE, Malaysia, Nigeria, and South Africa. Welcome. But for those of you who are actually here in person, you have the added bonus of a nice reception after the event with our panel members and Schar School scholars who are attending tonight. The Hayden Center is really a jewel of George Mason University, and the quality of these programs is among the best you will see in higher education. And we do this with leading policymakers and thinkers who are committed to addressing the most challenging public policy issues of the day, away from the often overheated debates and discussions in our national politics, so that we can develop informed understandings of key issues. This kind of analysis of key issues is needed now more than ever. When the Schar School was founded in 2016, our benefactor, Dwight Schar, expressed his hope for programs such as these that are nonpartisan, non-ideological, all about good government, good public policy, wherever it comes from, regardless of party or ideology. With that in mind, the Hayden Center was founded 8 years ago by former NSA and CIA director and Schar School professor Michael Hayden. And the Hayden Center has been a prominent voice in explaining and demystifying intelligence and national security issues. And if you missed some of our past programs, we have all of them on the Hayden Center website and YouTube channel. So again, thank you for attending. Hope to see you at many more of our events in the future. And I now welcome to the stage, are you coming to the stage, Larry? Yes? You're going to stay right there, okay. The director of the Hayden Center, Larry Pfeiffer. Larry.
So to repeat what Mark said, thank you all very much for coming. This is actually our largest registration since before the pandemic, which must say everyone's finally over the pandemic, maybe, I don't know. So we won't talk about the pandemics tonight, I guess. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Hayden Center, Mark gave a great introduction. We do have presence on most social media, so if you've got a favorite kind of social media, we're there. Just go find us. We post and repost things about intelligence throughout the week. So we repost it so you don't have to go hunting for it. We're going to have a question and answer session with you in the audience here and you in the audience virtually. For those in the audience, I'll give you a heads up when you can start lining up at these microphones on the opposite sides of the seating here. And I would just ask you when you come to the microphone, identify yourself, particularly if you're a journalist. We'd always love to know if there's a journalist in the crowd. And please keep your question as brief as possible and actually make it a question. That would be, if you have something you want to say to any one of us, wait till at the reception when we're all holding a beer or something in our hands. These folks here on the panel have a combined, I won't say how many years, but decades of experience in U.S. intelligence. They have led a number of our intelligence agencies. They have briefed presidents. They have briefed cabinet secretaries. They have discussed intelligence with foreign leaders. You know most of them, but for the odd one in the crowd who may not know who our panel members are, we do have General Hayden here to my immediate left. General Hayden served as a director at NSA and at CIA, the only person to serve in both those posts. He was also the first principal deputy director of national intelligence at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and has a distinguished military career before that as well. We have Ellen McCarthy. Ellen McCarthy most recently served as the Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. So it's the intelligence organization at State Department that supports our diplomats and our ambassadorial cadre. But she also had a number of years at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency as their Chief Operating Officer. She spent a number of years in different positions at the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Office. She has had 6 years in different jobs at the U.S. Coast Guard, which I think actually we can lean on some of her experience there if we talk tonight about what's going on in the Caribbean, not the hurricane. And she served as the president for 3 years of one of our favorite organizations, the Intelligence and National Security Alliance. If you're not familiar with them, Google them, look them up. They put on great events like this, but they work closely with industry, and they do a lot of great things to help you prepare for a career in intelligence as well. And then lastly, at the end, we have John Brennan. John Brennan, most of you know, as the director of CIA from 2013 to 2017. He served as President Obama's Homeland Security Advisor from 2009 to 13. He was the founder and first acting chief of the National Counterterrorism Center and its predecessor that, I can't remember the name of it, TTIC. You remember acronyms in the government, you don't remember what they actually stand for. And before that, had a good 25-year career working as a CIA analyst and a stint as a station chief in Riyadh. So tonight, we're going to discuss the major national security challenges facing the United States today and how the intelligence community is organized and must adapt to meet them. So I will open the question broadly and ask each of you, what do you believe is the most significant national security challenge facing the United States today? And is that different, and how is it different from when you held your posts? And I'll start with you, General.
Sure. So I was talking to the new CIA director, George Brennan,
Burns. Burns?
Burns, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. So he called me right before going to Congress for the first time. And I said, we talked more than a half an hour, okay? And I said, well, you know, it's China. It's really China. Okay, I got it, thank you. We talked about 10 more minutes, and then I said, did I say China? Okay, China, yeah, you're right. Okay, I got it. And then about 10 minutes after that, we're hanging up, and I said, you do something about China, right? That was interesting because I think it will be 100 years talking to China and the United States. That's the most important thing in the world right now. But I think I have to say one more thing. I'm worried about democracy in the United States as well. And if we don't have democracy, intelligence really doesn't matter.
Ellen.
Well, I think I'm going to riff off the democracy part because I like the applause. But no, in all seriousness, I think our greatest challenge is actually the state of our information ecosystem. So we live in a world where nobody believes anything. This actually is going to get to the democracy piece, General. That, you know, if you live in a world where nobody trusts anything, how do you stay as innovative? How do you stay as cutting edge? How do you stay as hungry if you just don't believe anything? And so getting to this democracy piece, I think that is one of our number one threats to our democracy. I believe that our democracy will continue, but I just don't see us staying as swift as we were in the past. And so I actually think, and I don't use the words mis and disinformation on purpose, I think the state of our current information ecosystem is causing us the biggest distress, and as a result, we're a target. So our our own, the things that make us the most credible country in the world, our free speech and our constitutional liberties, are being used against us right now by people who either want to make money, or they want to spread an ideology, or they just want to take us down easily. And so I'm just shocked that this is not something that we're more worried about today.
And how much of that threat do you believe is of foreign origin?
I think we make it easy for foreign malign influence. I think it's of our own doing, and it's very inexpensive, and it's very easy to sort of just throw fuel on the fire.
John?
Well, I think it's hard to narrow it down. There are so many national security threats that are out there. But I heard recently that there's some world leader who was proposing to end a 30-year-plus hiatus on nuclear weapons testing, which really concerns me, because I could see us stumbling into a nuclear arms race and even potential confrontation. And so that nuclear issue is one that does concern me. Relatedly, I certainly ascribe to the things that Mike and Ellen said, but on the technological front, I mean, we have seen just the accelerated pace of technological innovation that is transforming our lives. It's transforming the national security environment as well. Just look at what AI has done in a very short period of time. And then we are also, I think, on the advent of seeing some additional progress on quantum computing, which is really going to, create some havoc as far as the systems and networks that we have been relying on for so many years, cryptographically. So it's also a very changing international chessboard right now, where the role of the United States has profoundly changed in a very short period of time. I think a lot of our allies, erstwhile allies, partners, and adversaries are trying to figure it out, and I'm really concerned that the trust and confidence that our allies had in us for so many years has been eroded significantly, which I think is going to hurt us on the international stage, particularly when we want our allies and partners to join us, as they did so many times, Gulf War, 9/11, other types of things. And so I am concerned about how things are changing so rapidly, and not in a good way, and particularly, pick up on Ellen and Mike's point, the signal that the political drift here in the United States is sending to other countries in terms of authoritarianism seems to be accepted, tolerated, and supported. That is something certainly that is worrying from the standpoint of looking at the arc of history since World War II, where we thought that democracy was the one that was ascendant and ridding colonial powers and authoritarian regimes. It seems like we have taken a step back, and the role of the United States in that, I think, is particularly significant.
I'll toss it back to you, John, but the others can jump in. Do you think it's a permanent change? Do you think it's reversible? Do you think, or is it a binary where, depending upon who's in, which party's in control, whether we're going to be everybody's friend or somebody that can't be trusted?
I don't think there's anything permanent in this lifetime, in this world. I think it is much longer lasting than I think a lot of people had anticipated. I think the feeling was in Trump 1.0 that it was really an aberration in terms of where things were going. The fact that Donald Trump was elected once again, I think it really reflects the sentiment in this country, in a large part of this country, the electorate, that really do support a much different approach to international relations on the part of the United States, as well as a much different approach to tolerance and democracy here in this country, to include, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are okay with the weaponization of the Department of Justice, of the FBI, of the hollowing out of some of our intelligence agencies in terms of expertise, the actions that are being taken in the Department of Defense. Unfortunately, I think there are folks who are out there who are applauding that. So I do think, although I wouldn't say this is permanent, I would say that this is certainly more enduring than I certainly would like, because I am not somebody who believes that that trend is a positive one.
General?
Yeah, so a lot of times they call me and say, can you come here and talk with me? There were 2 people on the neck, okay, and now they're gone. Actually, they're gone, but also they didn't have a clearance anymore. So 6 people called me separately to talk to me to say, what do I do now? Okay? If you do that for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it'll take 10 years or more to get back to what we are doing now. So that's really concerned.
So to switch gears a little bit, John, you and you too, General Hayden, spent a lot of your time in your leadership years fighting the war, the terrorism war. We clearly, as you described, have entered a new era of foreign relations, a new national security paradigm, one in which perhaps terrorism has been de-emphasized. Do you believe that, is there any concern that we're taking the eye off the ball? Do you think an appropriate amount is being applied against it, given the successes we had in the war? And then thirdly, and the rest of you can jump in here as well, we have organizations being declared terrorist organizations, particularly counter-narcotics related gangs in the Western Hemisphere. I'm just curious as to thoughts you all may have on those designations and the ramifications of those designations with regards to how they're dealt with.
Well, clearly I'm not working in the government right now in the intelligence community, so I don't have real insight into how they are apportioning the resources and effort. It's one of the things that the U.S. intelligence community really needs to do, is to figure out how they're going to make sure that they are covering all of those issues globally. The United States, more than any other country really, has that global reach and responsibility. And I think the intelligence community, certainly my old organization, CIA, I'm sure is trying to figure out, okay, we take these resources and dollars and personnel away from fighting, terrorism, because as much as we did before, because Al-Qaeda has basically been, dismantled. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still sort of terrorism concerns that are out there. One of the things that I am concerned about, though, is that certainly in the previous administrations that I worked for, there was a real emphasis on trying to make sure that the actions that were being taken were rooted in law. And the AUMF, the Authorization for the Military Force, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, was the basis upon which there was very strong actions taken against Al-Qaeda, ISIS, other terrorist organizations. When I see what's happening off of the coast of Venezuela, Colombia now, I really have to ask myself, okay, so what is the domestic legal basis for that? And what is the international legal environment that they are now doing these things in? And I don't know the intelligence basis for going after all these boats or whatever. But I can tell you, when I was in the Obama administration working both in the White House and CIA, there was a very, very rigorous process to make sure that the intelligence was strong, was corroborated, and that we did everything possible to ensure that who we were targeting was in fact guilty of or involved in terrorist attacks. I don't know whether that's the case now. At least impression is that it's not as anchored in the law, and that the intelligence may be a bit flimsy.
Well, you did it and I did it at the CIA, It was really important, and if we had a mistake, the government, the president wanted to know. And now what's going on now is I really don't know, And what I'm saying is maybe it's okay, but the Congress isn't involved, Boy, when I was CIA, and the same thing for you, John, you talked with the Congress all the time, okay? And if we didn't, high water for that, that's not good at all. But now they don't talk to the Congress at all.
Or as we saw today, if they do, they're
It's
perhaps
only-
only talking to the one
That's
part,
exactly
the
right.
members from one party.
Yeah.
Ellen?
Can I jump in? Because I was there during the last Trump administration.
Yes, true.
Working in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, I've talked a lot about INR. I do believe that it is a model for how the community should look going out into the future. I've made that pretty clear. But I'll tell you a story. So one of my last acts there, and I can talk about it because it was unclassified, was during COVID. The origins of COVID was a very hot story. Everybody wanted to know, was it a lab leak or was it Wuhan? Was it the Wuhan Institute for Virology or was it a wet market issue? And literally my last days I'm in my office, I have a senior person from State Department come in and said, don't you feel bad for criticizing the president? What are you talking about? And threw down a copy of the Epoch Times.
Oh, God.
And said, see what this said. Now, I will tell you, this person I worked with is very bright, very engaged. This was not, I'm not making fun of this, but it was clearly a situation where it didn't matter how well vetted our intelligence was. It didn't matter. It just didn't matter how good it was. It could be eye-wateringly beautiful intelligence. And in the case of this story, we didn't know. I mean, we made it very clear. In fact, the next DNI came in and actually opened up an NIE and said, we just didn't know. But that didn't matter.
So what happened this past weekend for your CIA in State Department?
What happened is,
There was 2 or 3 people talking about, and they were corrected because you can't say that.
so that's, I mean, I will tell you, at least in my case, it was more an example of saying you can't use the Epoch Times as a source for the origins of COVID. It may be an accurate story, but when you look at bias, when you look at who produces the Epoch Times, you just can't do that. And so the issue goes to trust.
Right. So let's talk about that kind of global information environment and the issues of trust. And perhaps you could talk about some of the work you're doing now and organizations you're partnering with regards to helping people better evaluate and better understand what they're looking at.
So when that actually was a very catalytic moment for me in terms of thinking about what I wanted to do when I left government, because it really struck me that if this is the way we're operating now, if you have the most amazing intelligence community ever and it's just not providing the same value, no wonder, you look outside in the real world what's going on, and the fact of the matter is that if you look at trust as a measurement for sort of how we're doing, we're not doing very well. And these were days when we were spending lots of money on fact checking and content moderating. We were blaming social media for not doing more. We were blaming the technology platforms for not being the truth police, and yet nothing was getting better. And so that really struck me that there needs to be another approach to all of this. And by the way, I think the approach that I'm looking at in the private sector also can be applied in government, which really is this concept of having a common set of standards that apply to all sectors that are very clearly articulate what is quality information. You're never going to get rid of yellow journalism or mis and disinformation, but to the extent that, and I look at my time in the intelligence community where we're pretty clear about the sources and our confidence in the sources. And so can you apply that sort of tradecraft to the private sector and create an infrastructure where it's tools and standards and awareness and it's empowering people to make different choices?
Since we've talked to you and we talked a little bit about state INR, from a diplomatic perspective, how well is U.S. or has U.S. intelligence supported our foreign policy objectives? From your experience, what kind of role do you believe an organization like State INR has been playing in the Israel-Gaza situation or the Ukraine-Russia situation? We see a president who uses special envoys who kind of operate around the fringes of State Department, and he's not alone. Previous president did the same thing. Just curious We've seen some shrinking of State Departments, some shrinking of State INR. Just would welcome your thoughts on what's going on there and what, from your background.
You know, I was very blessed in many ways. You know, during my time in INR, we had an incredibly close relationship with CIA. INR is very small, so it's pretty good at leveraging the other intelligence agencies, but particularly with CIA. So I really believe, and you also happen to have a secretary who had been the director at CIA, so he totally understood. You know, he was an avid consumer of intelligence, and so I think in that regards there was so much possibility, because I always thought the beauty of INR was that it actually sat in the same spaces with the bureaus and the assistant secretaries, and was working with the embassies and working with the teams at the embassies. And so as a result, you had that connection, you had that familiarity. And I think, I can't speak to where it is right now, but I just thought that actually put INR, and in many ways CIA again, it was hard to put the dividing line between their analysts, but it really put them in a place where they understood what the policymaker really wanted and needed and what their motivation was. I mean, I've written an op-ed about this. I'm worried about sort of where INR is right now, because I don't see anyone really advocating for it. You know, it's an intel element that's gotten smaller since the days the OSS disbanded and the Research and Analysis Branch went to state, and there's really no advocacy for it. The DNI is not advocating for most of the smaller intelligence elements, and even within State Department, I don't really see strong advocacy, and yet I know the value it provides, and we'll see what happens. I guess that's.
So why don't we dive into some of the regional issues that are pretty hot right now. So the last time we had John and Ellen on stage was right after the attack by Hamas on Israel. So we've had a couple of years go by. We've had a lot of dramatic developments in the last couple of months. John, you've spent a lot of time in the region. You know a lot of the players or previous players in the region. What is your thinking about the current state of the Israel-Hamas situation? We have an on and off ceasefire. We've got talks today, you know, about developing some kind of multinational peacekeeping force. And
Yeah, well, I think Steve Witkoff is to be given credit for actually forging an agreement that brought the hostages home from Israel, brought the Palestinians home as well, because there were, you know, many hundreds of Palestinians that were detained, you know, since Hamas, also Palestinian prisoners out. So I think that was a good step. The 20-point plan has all of the, I think, the necessary ingredients of how you get to where you ultimately want to go. The implementation of this, though, is going to be exceptionally difficult. And I am not convinced that this Israeli government or any likely Israeli government in the near term is really going to make significant moves toward Palestinian self-determination. That's a long road, but now we have to worry about these violations that are taking place, the strikes that Israel is undertaking, whether or not there's going to be some type of multinational security force. Not blue helmets, these are actually going to be peacemaking, not peacekeeping forces that are there. The fact that there's so much chaos in Gaza right now as a result of the destruction of Gaza by the Israeli military. You have these gangs, you know, rival gangs and criminals and remnants of Hamas that are vying for control and power, and so it's really, I think, very, very messy. I'm not, you know, that optimistic that we're going to see a lot of progress in the near term. Important thing is to get some type of security situation in place so you can start to at least do some of the reconstruction and bringing in sufficient, you know, humanitarian assistance to these poor Palestinian people that are just, you know, dying of starvation, famine, illness, you name it. So, you know, it's really going to be up to the Trump administration, the Witkoff and his team, to continue to work very hard on this issue, to push this, because it's going to take a lot of work. Finally, the Trump administration, you know, turned the screws on Netanyahu and said enough is enough. And I'm not just blaming the Trump administration. I think the Biden administration also allowed too much of that military onslaught to take place. And now we're at a situation where it's really going to be very difficult to recover from all of that destruction. But so, you know, I'm glad the United States is engaged. The question is staying engaged. This is the first year of this administration, and there was a academic, William Quandt, who wrote a book years ago about the Middle East and peace. And his point was you really need to initiate some type of Middle East peace process in the first year of administration, because it's going to take a long time to actually put the pieces in place that you're going to be able to make any progress. So I'm hoping that they're not going to, you know, declare victory, that, you know, it's peace in our time in the Middle East. No, it's not. There's so much more that has to happen, and particularly trying to ensure that the Palestinians are going to have some type of viable political entity and a viable security force that's going to be actually able to deal with the situation in Gaza, and the situation in the West Bank is, you know, almost as bad.
It was really interesting. Recently, I was at a thing, 1 hour talking, and mostly there are Americans, okay, and some in the government, and they talked about everything that they wanted to say in the Middle East. And I watched it for 1 hour. Not one thing to the Palestinians, not a one for the Palestinians. They talked about Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and so on. But nothing about the Palestinians.
So the other major player in this game has for decades been Iran. We've seen Israel push back hard against Iran and its proxies in the region. Ellen, where do you think that positions us with regards to enhancing the prospects for peace in the region and pushing Iran towards a more responsible behavior?
I've got to make sure I understand your question. So where do you think
Well, Iran.
I know
How
Iran.
badly have they been pushed back? Have they been pushed back hard enough that they may become more responsible player? Or do you think that they're just going to sit back, lick their wounds, and begin to rebuild what they had before?
You know, there's been a vastly different sort of foreign policy objective from the first Trump administration to this one on Iran. And so I can't speak, do I think that they're going to, I do think they're going to come back. I personally don't think this is the correct approach. I actually preferred the foreign policy from the first Trump administration. So it's the whole of country sort of approach, which was, really looking at it from multiple angles: economic, defense, nuclear. So I think I'm a little bit ambivalent right now on how I think this outcome is going to be. They're still out there operating. We were just talking earlier about what's going on in Venezuela right now. Iran is still very much walking around Venezuela, operating pretty much freely. So I don't see this as the long-term solution, but I'm not in government right now.
Yeah, fair.
I'm the same way. I think in 1 year, the Israeli Air Force will bomb Iran, period, okay? And they want to do that more or less 1 or 2 years, and they're doing to bomb it, and Israeli wants to do that, and we shouldn't do that, but I'm afraid maybe they can.
So you're anticipating an almost regular rotation of bombings of Iran to keep their nuclear program down, to keep their...
It doesn't matter, nuclear or somebody else.
John, thoughts?
Iran certainly has been hobbled as a result of what has happened, with Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and others, so they don't have the capacity. They're a bit on their back foot. I think they're trying to figure out exactly how to navigate the current political shoals with the Trump administration. There's supposed to be some talks about, reviving some type of nuclear negotiations that are going on there. I don't think the Iranians would trust the Trump administration at this point, but, they are still in very dire economic straits, which is what prompted them to have the JCPOA in the first place. So I think they will look for opportunities maybe to try to enhance their economic situation or to improve it. The internal political dynamics in Iran, I think, are going to be most subject to some type of change or perturbation once the supreme leader goes. And he's going to go, within the next, couple of years. You could see that being a trigger or a spark for some type of internal churn and motion that could, in fact, lead to some type of foreign policy change that either will be positive or negative. But I think the situation at that point will be, dynamic.
You spent time in Saudi Arabia. You knew a number of the kings and princes that were around then. Obviously, there's been some changes since then. What do you see as the role of Saudi Arabia in the current situation with regards to Iran and with regards to Middle East peace?
Well, for many years, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Arabs were really ignoring the Palestinian issue. They felt that they could put it on the side burner, which is one of the reasons why there was agreement for the Abraham Accords, the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, whatever, because they thought they could, just move forward and forget about the Palestinian issue. October 7th really was a wake-up call, I think, to the Gulf Arabs and to the Middle East as a whole, that the Palestinian issue is still going to fester and be a real problem until it's addressed in some manner. So I'm glad to see that Mohammed Salman has basically resisted the Trump administration's entreaties to be able to, establish relations with Saudi Arabia, jump on board with the Abraham Accords, until there's some meaningful progress, at least on the peace process front, that gives the Palestinians at least some glimmer of hope that there is self-determination in the future. Mohammed bin Salman, I think he has learned from a lot of his mistakes. The dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi. I think he's realized that there are other ways to be able to ensure that he's going to maintain control and power. He still incarcerates a number of people inside Saudi Arabia who would have the audacity to, criticize him. But he's made a lot of changes internally in Saudi Arabia. On the social front, I think they're positive. And I do think Saudi Arabia is going to be a key player not just in the region, but globally in years to come. And his relations with China, with India, with Russia, and the United States. I think Mohammed bin Salman never wanted to be seen as sort of a vassal state of the United States. Want to make sure that Saudi Arabia is able to use its heft, its checkbook, and its influence, and its energy policy in order to make sure that it can put its imprint on a lot of issues, not just regionally, but internationally.
So, moving to another geographic region, Russia-Ukraine war. It was reported in the last 24 to 36 hours that there's been a disagreement in the intel community as to whether Vladimir Putin would be interested in doing negotiations or is absolutely no interest in doing any kind of negotiation. Interestingly, it was CIA that took the more positive perspective, and it was the State Department INR experts who said, "Oh, it ain't ever going to. It's not happening anytime soon."
I agree.
So, thoughts on Ukraine, Russia. Where are we? Where are we going? Can Ukraine win this? Can Russia win this? Is it a forever stalemate?
Sorry.
Well, I do think INR is right. They are a lot. This one I find so confounding. It's every day it's something new. The president talks to Putin and we're done. And then he's mad at Putin. I don't see the end is near. I guess that's where I am right now. I am on INR's side on all of this, but
I will say I know a lot of former case officers who I think would agree with the state INR position.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the real positions are. I mean,
That's just what the press is saying. Yeah, caveat that, of course.
I would like to think that the CIA will still speak the proverbial truth to power
Yeah.
and will put forth analysis and collect intelligence that may be at odds with the druthers of the current administration. I'd like to believe that. But if the current administration is interested in having negotiations with Vladimir Putin, I'm hoping, if the reports are right, that the CIA says that Vladimir Putin would be interested in negotiating, that truly is a reflection of objective analysis and good collection. I think Putin is willing to negotiate and talk about things. I mean, he's not going to change his ultimate goals in terms of having control over the entire Luhansk Donetsk region, and he may be willing to freeze in place and have a demilitarized zone there temporarily, whatever. He seems to be continuing to insist that Ukraine give up territory that Ukraine still has, that Russia has not controlled yet. And Putin, I think Putin and Xi Jinping, they're both very cunning individuals when it comes to engaging with the Trump administration. Putin obviously made a major mistake by his invasion of Ukraine. But I think he's playing this administration fairly well. Went to Alaska, was able to have the Putin visit U.S. territory, but he's not given up any of these ambitions and his goals, and I don't think he's going to. I think he feels that even though Trump has said, well, maybe we'll give Ukrainians tomahawks, that was yesterday's story. Tomorrow's story may be different, and I think Putin is much more. His positions are much more consistent, but I do think that he'd be willing to discuss exactly some of the modalities of how you get to where he wants to be, not where Zelensky and Ukraine want to be.
So, John, what about our friends in Europe? They're doing much more now, don't you think?
I do, and part of it is because they don't have the confidence the United States is going to continue to do it. And,
exactly.
I'm glad that they are putting more resources into defense spending, and they're starting to gin up some of their own sort of weapons production capabilities and fleshing out some of their military forces. So that's good, but I think they no longer, maybe rightly so, they shouldn't be relying just on the United States to come to their aid.
Yeah.
But when they see that the United States is pulling 700 troops out of Romania, and is going to maybe reduce its footprint in Europe, what signals does that send to our European partners? What signal does it send to Russia and Ukraine as well?
I was quite interested. I talked with David Petraeus about 2 weeks ago, and he knows a lot about Ukraine, and they're talking about drones. And every day, they say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 drones a day. Okay? I'm sorry. It's hard for me to name numbers, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 0, 0, 0. Every day, drones.
Is that manufactured or launched?
Launched.
They probably do the same on the manufacturing front too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is remarkable, the advances in drone warfare that have occurred on this battlefield by the Ukrainians, but also by the Russians.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So much to talk about. Switching gears, the state of the intel community today. So we have, we obviously have a shifting, as we've discussed, national security landscape, shifting foreign policy. We have an intelligence community that was restructured over a period of time to fight wars of terror. We've been transitioning for some period of time to handle this peer threat of Russia and China. From what you've observed, is the intelligence community on the right path? What kinds of things should an intelligence community be doing to make that transition? I don't know, Ellen, why don't you?
Again, it's so hard. Is the intelligence? I honestly don't know. I see what I'm reading. And I'm seeing that the DNI certainly is worried about politicization of intelligence, is worried about more transparency, wants to be leaner. But I haven't seen the things that are being done to actually, I'm seeing stuff getting taken apart, but I'm not sure I'm seeing what the vision is to do the things that she says she wants to do.
Do you see the DNI is worried about politicization? I want to make sure I heard that right.
I'm sorry, did you say that?
I didn't say that. I have a witnesses. Yes.
Worried about it? She's worried about it?
Well, don't you think?
Worried about doing it?
No, she's worried. She's worried about. She says she no longer wants politicization of intelligence.
Okay, right. But let's talk reality.
Let's talk.
Okay. Well, because there's an active politicization effort going on right now, and that's why.
I know this, right?
Okay, yeah. I just worried.
No. I think I gave a great example when the Epic Times was being used because we're criticizing the presidents. I think there's this perspective. This whole deep state concept is certainly not gone away, and so I do think that she really views it as her role to take on all the politicization of the intelligence community. I don't believe that. I've spent 40 years in the intelligence community. I don't believe there's a deep state. I've worked in 8 different agencies, haven't seen it. But certainly that seems to be where her focus is right now. She's taking apart elements that she believes were politicizing intelligence. The Foreign Malign Influence Center, anyone who touched elections is now gone, or they've had their clearances removed. She's cut back on capabilities that I don't quite understand. So I'm sure she has her reasons, but I haven't seen a strategy. I don't know what her vision is going forward. I have a lot of ideas, but I just haven't seen that yet. I have ideas of what I would do if I was there right now, but.
Mm-hmm. What would you do?
Well, I think, and there's a couple people in here who are very passionate about this topic, that there's an incredible opportunity right now to really look at how we deal with publicly available and commercially available information. And I think in some ways this is an incredible time right now to look at how we're incorporating our relationships with the private sector, how we're using data, how we're I think there's incredible opportunities right now. I know the Hill has taken some of this on in the Intel Authorization Act right now. I think there's more that we can do, but I'm not seeing the current DNI actually talk to this. Or maybe it's being said and I just haven't heard it.
No, that's exactly correct. What you're saying is great, and we have to do more. Right. Yes, indeed. But the DNI is gone. Okay, she is. It's all CIA. Okay, and we're both CIA directors, but that's not a good idea. But now that's what it is. That's what it is.
You look like you want to say something.
Well, I don't think it's any secret that Tulsi Gabbard didn't have a lot of intelligence experience or background when she was nominated, and she's been in there. And I also don't think it is a secret that a lot of people are very concerned about the ongoing politicization of the intelligence community as a result of the leadership of the ODNI, CIA, whatever. And so it really worries me that the base of our national security, which is the intelligence, to make sure our policymakers are informed appropriately about these national security threats, is being hollowed out. And we all know people who have left the community recently. And so that's what really does concern me. And I agree with Ellen. There's a lot of reforms that can be and should be made in the intelligence community overall. I tried to, have some reforms within CIA. I really do believe that with all the different types of capabilities we have now, whether it be open source or private sector technology and human and whatever. There needs to be much more integration and interoperability and connectedness of it. But the intelligence community is a large and frequently unwieldy, community, and so trying to get people to work across the stovepipes, whatever, is difficult. INR and CIA had a very close relationship. NSA, I was the Deputy Executive Director of CIA when Mike Hayden was the Director of NSA, and we had a lot of conversations about how we're going to bring those capabilities together as opposed to doing it separately. And to me, I think that's where the real benefit in Delta is going to be, if we get people at the leadership level to really be thinking about how we're going to play this as a team and how we're going to take into account the fact that the technological landscape has changed profoundly, so that the types of intelligence that we were involved in and pursuing 20, 30 years ago is now available in open source.
Right.
We don't need to waste resources and put sources at risk to pursue something that is obtainable in other ways.
Right.
And I think that gets to the story I told. There is this absence of trust, and there is so much information out there that if you don't like what you're reading in the intelligence reports, you just go someplace else, and that's happening over and over and over. I agree. We have to take a team approach. I mean, I would also add, and certainly there's others who have talked to this point far more eloquently than me, that this concept of collecting classified information and putting together incredible assessments without really also putting some focus on the sense-making part of what the IC should be doing right now, which really gets to, I think, what you're talking about. It's operating as a team. It's maybe the days of Sherman Kent, maybe they're behind us right now. Maybe we need to look at how are we working with the policymaker. And I think that's where I saw INR as being a little different. Just proximity to policymakers gave them a level of understanding that I never had at Naval Intelligence or Coast Guard or USDI. Just being in the room as policy was being discussed really changed things.
Yep.
I mean, it's 20 years since the startup of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
Right.
And, I think it makes some sense to do a review.
Yep.
Looking at over the last 20 years, where our experience has been. I am so glad that there is a DNI. Because before there was a DNI,
God,
the director of CIA was also the director of Central Intelligence. And there's no way
Absolutely.
one person can do both those jobs fully
Yeah.
and well. But that doesn't mean that the ODNI shouldn't be somehow reformed or changed, whatever. And maybe they have some brilliant strategic plans underway there. But you need people who actually understand the intelligence profession, the intelligence business, how the different parts of that great big machinery, the intelligence community, should be interoperating, as opposed to people going to come in and slash and burn because they don't like you because you worked for the previous administration.
Right. With regards to, we heard a little bit talk about policymakers and understanding intelligence. Is there any one thing you wish policymakers better understood about intelligence? Just one, John, just one.
The value of intelligence and the importance of making sure that there's going to be no politicization whatsoever about the intelligence. And that the presidents that I work for, and Mike and Ellen work for, we frequently were the skunk at the party
Yeah.
in a policy discussion, because we would bring in intelligence or analysis that was at odds with what they wanted to do. But I can tell you, I never once I served from President Carter, Reagan up through Obama. Never once did they not appreciate what the intelligence community was doing, was bringing it forward. They might yell and scream,
Yep.
Right.
but they needed to hear it. And the intelligence community leadership, at least throughout, of course, my career, were willing to stand up and to make sure that that intelligence was conveyed to the policymakers, the president on down.
Right.
That is so important, and I really do hope that Donald J. Trump will recognize the importance of that objective intelligence, that it's not just to support his policy instincts or interests. It is actually to give him a sense of what the implications are of pursuing certain types of policy paths, and also making sure that he understands the nature of the national security threats to this country.
Ellen?
I was actually very excited when Bill Burns became the director of CIA, because having worked in State Department and having read all of his books and gotten a chance to meet with him, and I'm not being political here, I'm just saying that he was just such an amazing diplomat, and highly respected. It wasn't a party issue. He understood the role of diplomacy as a tool for national security. But he was also an incredible consumer of intelligence, and then would go on to run the CIA. Yep. And I really thought that is the model. You know, someone that totally understands how intelligence and policy can work together. And again, I wasn't in, but from an outside perspective, I thought that it was a very successful run. I have to say that when I was at INR, we had an office, Mark, you were familiar with this, that brings in outside expertise to talk about, this office has since been cut, but it brings in outside experts to talk about issues that, you know, academics and scientists, and that office has since been taken down.
Right.
Removed, but it was all about sort of giving another perspective to things that maybe was even different than the intelligence.
I also would like the president to know he's not supposed to announce covert action programs.
Well, you know, it's funny. That's where I was going to pivot. But before I pivot, though, we're going to go ahead and start taking audience questions. So if you want to line up at the microphones, we'll get to that in a minute. If you're online watching, we've normally used the live chat for our questions. But today, what I would ask is, if you're online, send an email to Hayden, Hayden, @gmu.edu, and I'll be looking at my phone here in a minute to see what questions we have coming in from the online audience. So covert action and the president is a tool that a president can use. John McLaughlin, who was acting DCI, former deputy DCI, used to tell me that he always found it interesting that the longer a president was in office, the more likely they were to want to rely on a covert action plan to try to solve a problem that had become intractable. Obviously, we can't go into a lot of detail about actual covert action operations or plans, but to speak more broadly about how an administration can or perhaps should use covert action. General?
Well, in my experience, we went to the situation room and somebody said, well, how about covert action? It wasn't me. That's right, okay? It's somebody else. And then I would say, well, I'll look at it, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, we want to do that or not. Believe me, CIA is not involved much until we have to do it.
John?
Yeah, it's when the diplomats and the military officials say, we got nothing to help you. And they turn around to the CIA person and say, what can you do? But covert action really should be used to augment policies and to facilitate the achievement of those diplomatic, political, foreign policy, national security objectives. It shouldn't be sort of one-offs. And that's why this was a very rigorous process in the administrations that we all worked for before you would get to a finding, to make sure that you had the ability to understand how this finding, how this covert action program was going to help you realize those strategic goals and objectives that you really are after.
And there was 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences, and the first, second, third one was all that would go wrong.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Every covert action plan looks to what could go wrong, or if it went wrong, what would the implications be exactly. And I know there's been a lot of talk, as John suggested, about covert action in Venezuela. We've seen press reporting about a CIA proxy group that has been arrested down in Venezuela. And people call me and ask me, oh my God, did CIA people get arrested? I don't know. I mean, an adversarial group could use the fact that there's a claim that covert action is being used in their country to go start arresting all kinds of people saying that they're CIA proxies. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and start taking audience questions? Sound good? Why don't we start over here? It should be on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Tom Speciale. I've been a career intelligence officer for over 20 years, in the military for over 34 years. I recently left the DNI as a senior advisor for Tulsi Gabbard on counterintelligence and security. And in fact, I made many of the suggestions on dismantling some of the things that are being dismantled, and also made some suggestions on improvements, which I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards and get your feedback on, because hopefully it's going to be going to some important desks very shortly. I want to agree completely, Director, with your assessment on Iran being on their heels. We've got to keep them on their heels until they reform. We've got to do that. I disagree on the deep state, only because Trump says it's the deep state, but as we all know, it's really just the entrenched bureaucrats that run the country. I'll get to my question, I will.
Yeah, please.
But I want to establish sort of my bona fides on this question before I ask it, because I really hesitated to put you guys on the spot on this in public, but if you're not going to be at the after hours, I got to take my chance now. I was at the DNI when the first ICA was released regarding cyber influence on the 2016 election. I was there, I was working in the NIM, I read it. I also was involved in setting up the Principals Committee meeting that took place in December that resulted in President Obama directing a more fulsome, because I understand the difference between a cyber ICA and a total whole-of-government ICA intelligence collection on Russian involvement or influence in the election. And I noticed immediately in the ICA, the second ICA, because I had access to the classified ICA, that there were statements in that ICA that were not supported with the sourcing that was associated to the ICA, specifically that that Putin had directed the action and that Putin had, that the Russians were actively trying to support President Trump instead of just sow chaos.
To your question.
My question. There was an email that went around from General Clapper to yourself and Hayden. I'm sorry, not Hayden.
That's right.
Yourself and Comey, et cetera, that basically said we all got to get on board with this, otherwise it isn't going to work, basically. And I think that email puts everybody in the crosshairs. I would like to hear what your justification was for supporting the dossier that was known to be false being used as source material in the second ICA.
I don't know who put you up to this.
Nobody put me up to this, sir. I'm here on my
I don't
own.
know what role you played or who you are, but there's a bunch of bullshit that you just passed on. Absolutely.
The emails are clear, sir.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear. The second question
No,
Next.
I think we're going to go.
Next.
is
We can talk about it. Talk about it in the reception.
Russian disinformation.
No, we didn't say
No,
that.
it
Get the
didn't.
facts
You
straight.
said it was likely Russian disinformation.
No, we did not. We said
Yes,
it.
you did.
No.
In that memo,
Read the
it says
letter.
that
I'm
you
ignoring
signed
it. Okay.
And I just like, I know I'm going to get uninvited
Yeah.
to the after hours.
No,
And nobody
no,
put me up to this.
you're
I'm
done.
on my own.
Come on. All right, we're going to go over here.
This is disinformation.
Let's go over here for a
I won't
question.
be able to answer the question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Over
Good
here.
evening. My name is Tristan Witzig. I'm in my last semester here at Mason, finishing the International Security Master's Program. I have a question to all of you. The question is, what does the intelligence community do to avoid groupthink, and do you believe the current administration is doing enough to prevent groupthink?
Ellen, why don't you take a shot at that?
So we're not perfect. We've made mistakes. I'll start with that. But I actually think we do a pretty good job through the National Intelligence Estimate process, through vetting of intelligence. I think we do a pretty good job of trying to prevent groupthink. I think, again, my old shop, Bureau of Intelligence and Research, takes great pride in being obstreperous and not always agreeing with what other agencies will say. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But I mean, I have to say, if I was to give them a grade, I would probably give them an A-. So we could do better. We have made mistakes. There have been certainly instances where groupthink has been applied. But I think the one thing that I love about the community is that we tend to learn from our mistakes. If there's not outside influence and taking a look at what we do it ourselves. So I think we're pretty good.
And folks are encouraged to speak up.
Right.
If they have objections or differences of view, and certainly in the National Intelligence Estimates
Right.
process, they want that. And there's going to be, pieces in there that will say that INR disagrees or CIA
Right.
disagrees. It is designed to avoid groupthink. I mean, it's a very good question. And I think the intelligence community has learned over the years that we're richer as a result of a variety of views, even if they are sort of, disparate, certainly.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, I swear I'll be nicer with my question from this side. First of all, my name is Yash Singh. I'm an IT auditor for one of the big four with a budding interest in intelligence. So thank you all for coming and speaking to us. It's very informative. My question to you is about use of technology and intelligence in the government space in general. You mentioned that this is one of the biggest opportunities right now we have today for use of open source intelligence and technology in general for information gathering. My question to you is, if the intelligence community were to tap into opportunities for intelligence gathering or intelligence work using emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, or AGI, how do you deal with the, I would say, the noise that there is in the amount of information out there, especially given the advent of social media? Social media has allowed anyone and everyone to come on and post information, whether factual or not, and has created a greater amount of noise that there is in factual evidence or factual information out there. So my question to you, part one, is how do you plan to deal with that when it comes to intelligence gathering, especially using open source intelligence? And then two, do you think that noise in social media contributes in a major factor to the undemocratization of the country? So.
Ellen, why don't you? Sounds like it's right up your alley.
I'm not, so first we can get to the deep state question, by the way. There's not a deep state. I mean, I have to say, this is the question before. I didn't get a chance to answer that. But I will say, having worked at State Department, pretty much every foreign service officer I worked for thought they were smarter than whoever was running the State Department, regardless of party. So there's a deep state, but it's been there entirely since there's been a State Department. So it's not necessarily political. But to your question about technology and social media, I'm not going to blame the social media companies for the state of our information ecosystem. But I think there are some answers. And again, I think it gets to really data integrity and a common set of accepted standards that are labeled and very transparent and understood both by those who are developing technology I'm a fan of AI. I think AI is, I'm an avid consumer of AI, but like any great finding, there's always a jerk that's going to use it for something bad. And so, the second that you don't have to steal the crown jewels of the intelligence community anymore. All you have to do is just tweak it a little bit, and everything is off in terms of data. So I think a common set of standards that is understood by those who are involved in acquisition and collection and analysis that apply across the government and even in the private sector really is a place to start. Regarding the social media noise, if you have a common set of standards, then you're going to know what's in your information. You're going to know what to use and what not to use. I believe that the change is going to come when we put far more focus on the demand for information and spend less time blaming those who are supplying information. And so I think that's the single first step we should take.
Yeah, that does, and thank you for the answer.
No. Let's go ahead and go on to some other.
Great.
Got a lot of people
Thank
lining
you.
up, running out of time. Everybody try to keep your questions as tight as you can so we can get through as many of you as possible.
Hi, folks. My name is Nick Gold. I started an organization a few years ago called Declassify UAP, and given tomorrow's holiday, maybe it's on theme. And I'd also just like to thank all of you and everyone in this room for your government service. It's so appreciated. Director Brennan, a few years ago on a podcast, you said, relating to UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and this is a verbatim quote of yours, I think some of the phenomena we're already seeing continues to be unexplained and might in fact be some type of phenomenon that is the result of something that we don't yet understand and that could involve some type of activity that some might say constitutes a different form of life. And I'll read a Clapper quote. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but he said on CNN a couple years ago, "I don't know why we haven't been more transparent about it, UAP, in the past, and I'm part of that crime, I guess. In my former capacities, I didn't insist on more transparency with respect to this issue." And these quotes are not in a vacuum. Many high-level officials have said very interesting and eyebrow-raising things about the UAP topic over the last few years.
So your question?
Very specific question. Are you aware of any intelligence assessments that have been generated by the DoD, IC, other federal agencies, or federal contractors that list as a possibility that for some of these outlier UAP cases, what we might be seeing is some form of non-human intelligence in our environment or the techno-signature thereof?
I have no knowledge of all those different, entities that you would talk about, what type of, papers or studies that they did. My point in that podcast was just to say, I realize that there's so much in this universe that we don't understand. And that there have been some things observed way out there that are not explainable. And so I was just allowing for the potential for some of these things to actually be something that some people would say is a form of life. It's self-generating, self-motivating, whatever else. We know so little about this world. And so I was just not going to close off my mind and say, no, not. But I don't know of any of those reports that you are.
Well, and to you and the other guests, you're not aware of any intelligence assessments that list that as a possibility?
As a possibility? What do you mean a possibility? I mean, everything.
Well, I mean, intelligence assessments often have possibilities.
Do not exclude possibilities.
Perhaps you can continue the conversation later when we're having a drink. The Hayden Center did an event surrounding UAPs not too long ago, so you could look at our YouTube channel and watch a whole event about UAPs and intelligence. We're almost out of time, but if you guys are fine, maybe we'll do like 5 more minutes with questions before we break for that.
Maybe
All right.
get a couple of questions together or something. I don't know if you want to.
Well, just again, we can speed up. I don't think we're going to get to everyone's question, but if we go to a few more. Over here.
Yeah, so just a quick one. Bill Leonard, way back when, I used to be in charge of security and counterintelligence within DoD. And in that vein, I wonder if you could address, from your perspective, anyone on the panel, the pros and cons of the ongoing debate right now in terms of D&I assuming a greater supremacy role with respect to counterintelligence issues?
Interesting. We were actually talking about that before this event because there had been some stories written about it. General Hayden, do you recall when the D&I stood up?
Yes.
There were conversations about how we should organize.
That's exactly correct. But I was only there 1 year, and then I went to CIA. So I don't know exactly what happened after that, I'm afraid.
At the stand-up of the D&I, they basically created this organization known as the National Counterintelligence Executive and gave it a modicum of powers to coordinate. I remember with the very first meeting at the ODNI to bringing together disparate elements working counterintelligence in the community. And right at the very first meeting, they found out that none of them agreed on what the definition of counterintelligence was. So, but John.
There are so many dimensions of counterintelligence. I think the question is who might have primacy? But it's primacy over what aspect of counterintelligence? And talking about team sport, counterintelligence is a real team sport. Between the intelligence community, law enforcement, others, I mean, it's when the Russians interfered in the 2016 election to try to get Donald Trump elected, a judgment that has been validated numerous times. NSA, CIA, FBI, we all had to work together because there are so many dimensions of that, and also affects also, if you're talking about things that are happening in this country, trying to respect the privacy rights of individuals and citizens who may in fact be suborned by foreign intelligence services, it really is tough. And that's why I'm hoping that they're going to have some type of constellation of CI elements that are going to be able to work together. And the question of who has primacy over the analysis, the operational elements, the law enforcement elements. I mean, these are things that I think really need to be worked out among experts who have deep experience in the field.
Over here.
Thank you. My name is Adam Litchfield. I'm a freshman here at George Mason University. I have a question. Israel is a member of the Five Eyes Agreement. Mossad has tried multiple times to poach.
No, it's not.
Not.
No, it's not.
Okay, but we still work closely in intelligence with Israel, right? My bad, I got that
Okay.
wrong. We still work closely in intelligence with Israel.
Yes.
There's been multiple examples of them trying to poach our intelligence officials over to them and try to sway them to their side. So my question to you is, how can we work with Israel in good faith if they're always working with us in bad faith?
So I will give my answer. When I was there for almost 3 years, Dagon was the involved in Mossad, or yes, and he was a wonderful man, and I talked with him all the time. But every time I know I'm an American, he's not.
I mean, I have to say that was my experience. Well, I mean, Israel, at least when my time, and it was our closest intelligence partner, and I didn't see what you described.
Work very closely with the Israelis.
Yeah.
But as Mike said, they have their own national objectives and interests. And so we work very closely with them when our interests aligned. But at the same time, there are things that the Israelis were involved in. And also, other intelligence services will look at the United States and see whether or not they can get some additional information from us, or even technology or whatever else. So you just have to be mindful that you're working with another. Yeah, you said it's the closest intelligence partner. I would say, the Brits.
The Brits are pretty darn close, yeah.
The Brits, and they're part of the Five Eyes. But, the Israelis have
pretty tight.
very aggressive operational, capabilities, and very good.
Like I said, when I was there, the Israelis did some things that we wouldn't do. And they didn't talk with us at all.
All right, so I'm going to take a question from the online audience because we do need to honor them as well. So the question from Michael Cerna is, what are your thoughts and advice on advising country teams, specifically in the Western Hemisphere, with the recent unprecedented attacks on alleged counter-narcotics vehicles? And do you have any concerns about these operations, at least as we understand them from the little bit we've learned from the government and the press?
I think a lot of concerns that we've expressed here.
I think a lot of concerns in that neck of the woods, okay? And I don't know what will happen to I'm sorry. What I want to say is, what do we do about different, in Brazil or Argentina and so on? I'm glad I'm out of that now.
Well, one aspect of this issue is greater than the counterterrorism efforts that we took part in further afield, is the issue of U.S. persons, potential for U.S. persons to be involved in this activity, people having varying statuses of U.S. citizenship or residency.
And we don't know.
And we just don't know.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
Again, when I worked in the Obama administration, there was tremendous value placed on all lives, not just American lives. And that's why there was great effort made to try to ensure that you minimize to the greatest extent possible any type of what's called collateral damage, injury or death to innocent non-combatants. I don't know whether or not the same care, especially when I hear the Secretary of Defense, not the Secretary of War, the Secretary of Defense, say that there's been these silly ROEs, the rules of engagement, that they're doing away with. That really worries me. The United States military, I think, has been really quite admired because we try to adhere to the laws of war, proportionality. And if you're going to push aside the rules of engagement, and you're taking these shots against these boats, again, I don't know what the intelligence basis is. I don't know how much confirmation, corroboration there has been about it, and whether or not they know everybody on that boat is a drug dealer. And even if they are, I don't know of any US law that says you can kill them,
Right.
or any international statute that says, yes, you can kill them.
All right, I apologize. We're going to take one last question over here, and then I'm going to wrap things up after that, so go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Max. I'm a graduate student at SICE. Thank you all for your time this evening and for your service. I wanted to ask, as private citizens, what do you think the likelihood that FISA 702 gets reauthorized in April? And should we as Americans feel comfortable that our information or intelligence that's being collected in conversations with non-US persons is being appropriately minimized?
I think it's my turn. So I like 702, but now I'm worried. You know what I mean? Because you're doing something a little bit different than before. And it was okay. It was good to do that. And maybe we could do the same. But now I'm worried about that. Because our government, well, I have a problem. I have a problem. So we did a lot for when I was there at NSA, a lot. And it was very controversial. And I'm good with that, okay? But now, I just don't know. I'm worried about that.
So the concern being what population these tools may be applied against?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. John, did you?
I was going to say, when I was in government, NSA, FBI did their level best to minimize information related to US persons. But when you're collecting information about somebody overseas who's in touch with here, there need to be the rigorous procedures. But intelligence officers, law enforcement officers, they're not perfect. And we've seen that there have been issues that have come up. But like Mike, I believe that 702, the capability, as long as it's finely tuned and it's carefully overseen and it's regularly audited, and there are some strict rules, and there have been a number of refinements over the years that I think have been very good. So I'm hoping that there's going to be the appropriate and very judicious language that's going to be in 702 that will respect privacy rights of US citizens. But at the same time, like Mike, I don't know whether I have confidence that the leadership right now is going to adhere to the same standards that I think we all here followed.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we break, I just want to bring to your attention, there's a partner organization of friends of ours called the Council on Intelligence Issues. They're going to be holding an event on November 5th, a virtual event. They were going to be holding it tonight, but then we planned this event, and they were a little worried that some of you might not attend their event. So I promised them that I would let you all know about it. It's going to be an interesting panel. It's going to be led by this gentleman here in the front row, Mark Lowenthal, former Assistant Director for Central Intelligence for Analysis and Production, correct? So for George Tenet. So you can talk more detail with Mark about that. But that's a link to register, take a photo of it or whatever, and you can sit at home and take it in. But we didn't talk about it much tonight, but intelligence oversight is something that we in the intelligence community found great value in from Congress, and they're going to be addressing the broad 50-year history of that congressional oversight. So please do check that out. I want to thank all of you for coming and attending. I'd like to thank our online audience for watching as well. Thank you for all your questions, and apologies to those who we didn't get to. We are going to break here and go over to across the hall here to our multipurpose room where we've got some food and beverages waiting for you. We have asked our guests to stick around for a little while if they can to chat with you one-on-one. And the gentleman who asked the first question, if you want to come eat some food and have a beer, we're more than happy to have you come. I would like you all to just join me in a round of applause for our panel here. And I would ask you all to please exit the auditorium, make your way over to the multipurpose room, give us a chance to get our mics off, and get ourselves over there in a few minutes. Thank you.